Hello, welcome to our webinar today. I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds for people to continue to join. Wow, lots of participants this morning. That's great. I feel like I'm watching the lottery numbers. Woo. So it looks like we have a little over 170 people joining us today. So this will be great for the fireside chat that Deneen and Gail are going to have. I wanted to, again, thank you for joining us. And just a reminder, this is for CPE, so you will need to stay on for 50 minutes. You will also need to respond to 3 of the 4 polling questions, and there is a survey at the end. About an hour after the event is over, you'll receive an email to thank you for your attendance, and there'll actually be a link in the email that gives you resources that Gail is providing to everybody. So please check out that email for more resources. So I'd like to introduce Deneen and Gail. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for Growth Strategies in a Tech-Driven World. My name is Deneen Dias, and I'm Vice President of Growth and Strategic Relationships at BotKeeper. I'm very passionate about helping firms evolve through the use of technology. I have spoken at several conferences, not as many as Gail, and I'm the host of a podcast called On the Edge. Gail, would you also please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, Deneen. I'm Gail Crosley. I'm a strategic organic revenue growth consultant, and I work exclusively with CPA firms across the board, have for 20 years now, and my consulting is around transforming them to high growth environments. Before that, I spent a couple of decades in tech. So I was with IBM for a dozen years, another decade with venture capital back and private equity backed startups, and I decided that along the way to bring all those best practices from the corporate world over into the accounting world. And so a lot of the work that I do is in infusing our technologies into our services. And so that's why it's a perfect match for our fireside chat today with Deneen.
And I've been looking forward to our chat today. Has my screen gone away? Is it just the two of us now, Della?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, great. And so this really isn't scripted, but I've known you for years, and I've been looking forward to talking to you because there's so much going on in the profession right now. There's just really a lot happening. And because of the tech-driven innovation, things seem to be exploding. So can you share your thoughts on why this explosion is happening now?
Yes, thanks, Deneen, and it's great to be here too, talking to you. This is one of the most fun things I do is to talk to Deneen.
Always, right? There'll be no lack of discussion, that's for sure.
So the question is, there are a lot of things that have happened over the last 10 years, and before 10 years ago, it was kind of dead. You know, tech. What I mean by that is that tech was in the back, or not tech. It was boring. Tech was in the back room. It was, you know, driving our operational practice management systems, et cetera. But there was nothing to do really with growth. I mean, the only thin thread was CRM, and that was a very thin thread. But in the last decade, of all the things that have happened, there is one thing that has been the most significant. And before I give you the answer, audience, if you'll just sit there for a moment and think, you know, we've had all these various things that happened. What was the one thing that we could pick out of the pile and say, this was at the epicenter? And if you can't think of it, or you might have thought of it, of all those things, it's the cloud.
Yep.
Cloud unleashed unlimited amounts of data, so huge data sets. And that has major implications on our services, the power of data and being driven by data, and our move to advisory. So that was huge. But along with that was unlimited compute power. So when we tossed our servers out and went into the cloud, we have like unlimited power, and it's not limited to just the server sitting in our office. And because of the significance in telecom and all the speediness of it, unlimited ability to communicate all over the world. So these three things together went from, allowed us to have a world that looked like this to one that is like that and literally has no limits. So that's it.
So my guess was the cloud. I guessed correctly.
Good.
And that's where I started. I started in '08 at CPA.com because the CPA.com had the vision that the cloud was was a game changer. It was going to allow firms to have access to data real time. And so, here at BotKeeper, why I'm here now is I believe that AI and machine learning is the future. It is what's next after the cloud. But because again, it's the way I think about the data. And firms have so much data coming at them, right? And so that's really where I see the opportunity with the power of the real-time data to move into this advisory role. And so can you share more about your thoughts around, how firms can make that shift with the data into advisory?
Yes. So one of the impediments, Deneen, is that we have been calendar driven for years, for decades and decades, and the calendar drives what we do. And now we're moving into a world where we need to initiate because we have all this data at our fingertips and all these things we could do with it, but we're not calendar driven anymore. We have to actually drive the ship and drive it where we think it should go. And that means that we have to go from compliance driven and responsive to driving and explore and initiate and initiate what could we do with all this data. And if we just sit back and wait for someone to tell us what to do with it, we're not going to get very far, because advisory services is all about leading the client. It's not about responding to requirements that the client has to have because of a banker or whatever else. So the mindset shift is a pretty significant one. And the thing that I believe is holding us back the most, we just aren't to it. We haven't had to train our initiation muscle and go out and explore and say, okay, in real estate or nonprofit or whatever industry, what are the business use cases that are accounting departments out there in our client organizations need? Right. And when we start looking for business use cases by industry, we're going to find those things, and then we're going to be able to connect the dots on going way beyond the monthly bookkeeping and financial statement close and get up to controllership services and CFO outsourcing services and things that controllers and CFOs do. Right. The business owner, and that's where we need to go.
Well, and I think that's why we're seeing so much growth in the CAS. Everyone's talking about CAS now, and it's like that buzzword that firms talk about is there's so much growth in CAS because I think it's about listening to the client. And the client is coming to firms saying, can you help me? I want to outsource to you. Can you help me? Right? And firms traditionally have said, no, I don't want to do that work because it's time consuming, it's low end, it's not profitable. But I think to your point, it's like pausing and just listening, like what is the customer asking for? And start saying yes to the demand. Right? They are asking, who else do they have to talk to about their business? Right? And they trust their accountant. So they're calling the accountant saying, I want to talk to you about my data. I want to talk to you about my numbers. I want you to help me grow my business. And so, do you have thoughts about ways that they can build this, technology driven part of the practice?
Yes. Well, we have a very interesting dynamic, Deneen, and about 6 or 7 years ago, I keynoted at the Digital CPA conference. And I had a slide that showed the audit and tax leaders, the older stern, and the suit and tie, and they're on the computers, and the poor little redheaded stepchild behind the fence.
So true.
The CAS practice. It's like, who are these people, over in that corner office on the other floor that we don't know what they do, but all we don't want to know what they do. They're keeping the books and,
right.
Head and just don't lose us money. And the reality is, and I said it then, and it's come to pass, is that the redhead stepchild is the place where the cloud started and is emerged. And that was the major tool. And I said, you wait a few years because the cloud's everything. And the redheaded stepchild is going to be in the driver's seat. And truly, when you look at it, the tax people have a very limited, view of what they need to do, and it's very compliance driven. And then the auditors are always wondering about being conflicted out, right? So they may not be able to do those things that the client is asking. And here the CAS practice is right in the middle of the accounting department, right in the middle of all the data, and it's the perfect place to do it. And so the challenge is that we are so strapped with resources right now, we can't get our head out of the books to do the controllership stuff, except if we have the bot keepers of the world and understand we've got to push that stuff down, because if we push it down, we can't elevate up to those.
Totally. And that, I don't know, Della, were you doing that? Because we could see the screen and someone clicking through, but that does lead to my next polling question. So, or my first polling question. So, oops, here we go. Yeah. Describe your knowledge of AI and machine learning. So, are you thinking about that in your space? That's certainly where BotKeeper fits, is we're using more technology to automate, to Gail's point, all the time-consuming gathering and coding and such. So the first one is, I have a basic understanding, but don't use any of it. What? Or I use AI and machine learning in my business today, but I'm not an expert. Or the last one is, I consider myself an expert.
So I'll give a couple more seconds for people to respond to the poll, but it looks like about 60% have a basic understanding.
Okay, great.
Closing poll in 3, 2, 1. Thanks.
All right. Well, so I have a basic understanding, but I don't use any of it. We're using AI and machine learning every single day, all day long, right? Especially you've got Facebook that's listening to what you say. I mean, my husband and I joke because we'll talk about something. Right now, my daughter's obsessed with Stranger Things. And all of a sudden our phone, right, in Facebook, Stranger Things is popping up because we're talking about it. And so AI and machine learning, we might, understand the basics, but we are using it every single day. And so, to me, what's exciting about that is all the innovation, right, that all this technology brings, and what the AI and machine learning is going to just free up, everybody's time, so we can move into this new way of working together and being very creative. And I know, Gail, you have a couple of examples, different types of levels of innovation that you think about. So I'd love for you to share those types.
Sure. This is something that I discovered a few years ago when I was trying to frame up, why is it that our firms are stuck in the back room with infrastructure applications, infrastructure usages of technology, when in fact we need to come out of the back room and into the front room so that the technology is embedded in our services and not just hanging out in the back room. And so the framework that I discovered is called Type 0, 1, and 2. Type 0 innovation is in our firms, on our firm's data. And I'm talking now about the front room, not the back room. So front room stuff goes into Type 0, 1, and 2. Or I go a pyramid, actually, 0, 1, and 2. So Type 0 is we're using these tools on our own data. And so we're learning and practicing. An example would be a data analytics, Power BI, or something like that on our own financials, our industry and service line data, or using bots on our own accounts payable and accounts receivable. Those would be, Type 0. Okay. Type 1 takes these tools then and embeds them into our services themselves. So as a result of that, they're in our services, but our clients don't necessarily see them, where it's efficiency and it's quality. And so Type 0 is better decision-making, that's the value proposition. Type 1 is efficiency and quality, but Type 2 goes beyond that, and that is using it in our services to create new innovative services like advisory and consulting services. And when we get to Type 2, it isn't about better decision making for our firm, and it isn't about quality and efficiency, but rather it's about driving revenue.
Yeah.
So it's easy for a firm to get stuck and saying, oh, we're doing so much and it's great. And then I peel it back a little bit and I know they're stuck in type 0 or 1 and they're not pushing up to type 2. So they're not anywhere close to where they really need to be, which is driving additional revenue above and beyond type 0 and type 1.
That's great. Well, should we let's do another polling question, because I want to get this out of the way because I want to dive into a big question. So the next polling question is, what is the biggest threat to your business growth? Is it bandwidth to take on more clients? Or is it that you're competing? You see there's a new competitor in town, which is these venture-backed cloud accounting firms. I feel like I read about a new one every other day. Della, where did they go? Oops. Retaining my bookkeeping staff is the third. Can they still vote? And diversifying my skills or offering to clients. Is this the poll results, Della?
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. If you could just pop your answers into the question box. That way I also know that you're still with us. That would be great.
Great. Okay, so sorry about the hiccup there. It looks like there's a close tie. Number one is bandwidth to take on more clients. And the close, well, actually, number one is diversifying my skills or offering to clients with bandwidth to take on more clients. And so that's where you can put this down, Della. And Gail, that's what I wanted to talk about next is there just seems to be so much for firms to get their hands around, right? They're at capacity and they don't really have time to think through these new products that they can offer, new services. So where would you suggest firms start?
I would start, and I'm doing a lot of this work with my clients, with pruning out the underbrush. And it's like, I don't want to prune out the underbrush because my revenues are going to drop and I don't have any new revenues to replace them. And I'm getting, it's too scary. Or, every last partner wants to hang on to their own clients. That's another whole conversation for another day about, about the nuances of doing it. But it needs to happen for sure. Because without it, you don't have time for any future think.
That's right.
About it, future think has pretty much evaporated in our profession over the last couple of years. And if you aren't purposeful about future think, there will be no bright and sunny future for you. And because we have all, especially in CAS, we have all these, clients that we accumulated over the years that we did as an accommodation, and they don't fit our business model anymore. Because we've moved from an accommodation and and not a profit center to now we are the fair-headed child. We are we are the future of the firm, and we cannot hang on to this stuff.
Yeah,
we have to divide it into different industries, and analyze it and do profitability analysis on it and put a fence around this stuff. And either prune it out or send it to India or get it on a bot or get it somewhere, send it down to Susie's bookkeeping shop down the street. But to have all of it cluttering up the gears of our business model is a travesty. I'm going to tell you a little story.
Right.
At one point in my career, I was head of marketing for MCI's Southeastern Division, which was $1 billion in revenue. So I headed up marketing, and I came in and I had 30 people that instantly reported to me, and I started looking around to see what they did. 28 of them were doing things that had nothing to do with marketing.
Wow.
They were doing stuff like administrative, changing people's phone lines to MCI and all this. And I'm like, where's the marketing in the marketing department? It was the slop pot of everything anybody wanted to do or didn't want to do, and they sent it over to this group. And so I had to literally get 28 people moved on to something else and completely repopulate the marketing department. And my point to you is that the boss told me, the division president, listen, this is your mission in your charter, and I get it done. And before I could get it done, I had to really look at what I had, and I had to make some recommendations as to what I was going to do with this so I could free myself up to execute the mission. And I say this thing to a lot of CAS leaders right now.
Yeah. Well, or even, I think it like, you know, tax and accounting have gone typically hand in hand, right? The tax, and typically, you know, the tax person would get a client and send it over to the accounting team to say, hey, can you clean this up for free? Because I can do the tax return, right? Or, you know, hey, we've got to take over their books so that I can do the tax work, right? And so like, don't charge them a lot because so I can charge them. Now I think firms are looking at this and saying, hey, we've got, like to your point, let's look at our book. Let's look at our book of business and let's look at those, you know, do we really want to do individual returns, or do we want to bundle things together, to bundle in the corporate and the individual as well as the accounting, and shift it all to be this real time talking to you more about your business and bundling the services. So I think, you know, it's really looking at your client base, looking at the services that you've been providing, and start evolving it, shifting it, having conversations with your clients now about tax season. We're doing things differently. And are you seeing, you know, some success with the consulting that you're doing, and what success, like what are you seeing firms do around this that's working?
Well, I'll tell you what successful firms do. This shoebox accounting thing that we do for free, it has been a problem for a long time. And as a result, when you start the CAS practice, the first thing you do is step back and say, okay, where is this stuff? And you look under every rock, and it's like you take inventory. Some of it's in the tax department, some of it's over in CAS. Some of it's, you know, you don't even know Susie's doing bank recs down on, you know, on the first floor on a cube somewhere. And what I do is I get all interested parties to the table, like in a big conference room. And some of the conversations are hilarious. Like, well, okay, and I have this grid that is, you know, here are all of the things that are done, and here is what we call them. You know, and you see the bank recs are being done in 4 different places that we call things. And I'll never forget the seminal moment when 2 people in the room said, well, I do financial statement prep. And the other one said, I do financial statement prep. I said, okay, ladies, what's the difference? Well, mine's different from hers. And I'm like, hey, let's tear it down here.
Yeah.
And once you get that, you know, you get the tax head in there, and you get the CAS head in there, and any other interested parties that have their own little, you know, clump of people doing stuff, and you bring it all together and say, let's shine a bright, shiny light on this thing, and we're going to define the way it's supposed to be, right? The way that we want it to look like in 12 or 24, whatever months, so that we can get, if we're going to do shoebox accounting, no problemo. Put a fence around it, call it what it is, and say that it's an accommodation and there's not going to be any, you know, profit motive in it at all. But don't pretend it doesn't exist. And it grows like kudzu, which living in the South grows, it's a weed that grows 1 foot a day. And, you know, it's all over all the trees and kills everything. So
I love it. Yeah, because it's a time suck. I mean, there's no better way, right? And it's exhausting your people, and people are leaving. And so you're freeing up your people, you're putting process around this. And now, well, actually, Della, let's launch the list polling question, because I'm going to shift into the next thing. Okay, have you started to build out your CAS practice? And where are you? And so the way I think about CAS, and Gail, I know you and I have talked about this, that non-profitable, you know, after the fact shoebox stuff, that's not CAS, that's 0.0. And as firms make the shift into the cloud and get the data real time, that shift now, they're saying, you can outsource to us. You can outsource your payroll, your bookkeeping, outsource to us. We'll get it all in our tech stack. We'll make it accurate. and we'll be able to have clean records that we can advise you on. That's what I call CAS 1.0. Then once you get clean records, now you can start guiding and advising your clients. And so 1.5 would be doing more like outsourced controllership, or the more complex stuff like fixed assets, rev rec. Those are things that take more time and you can charge more for. And then what I call CAS 2.0 is truly that advisory, like CFO services, where you're looking at KPIs and you're looking at forward-looking metrics. And so I'd love to just hear from the audience of where you're at so we can get a good understanding of who we're talking to. Where would you say you are in your CAS practice?
So currently 68% are at 0.0, 19% are at 1.0, 6% 1.5, and 7% 2.0. And just to confirm, this is the third polling question. There will be one more polling question.
Thanks, Stella. Okay, so Gail, it sounds like we are talking with a lot of the firms. The majority of the firms are at 0.0. They're doing what you were just talking about, right? The stuff that's all hidden and that you don't have a square around and you're not really having it profitable. And so the whole concept in this shift is to look at your book, start culling clients, start pushing the work down to technology or India, and start offering more services. So once you start freeing up your team, who would you say, give us some examples of some new services you're seeing firms start to provide and what the future looks like?
Interestingly, I start with the accounting department in corporate America itself, right? And the advantage of having somebody in your firm that came from corporate is that they who were in a practice before, in corporate America, they know what an accounting department looks like. They know the CFOs at the top and the controllers next level down, the accounting manager and the accounting departments, and how it's all, and they understand, how it all comes together. And so when you think about it, if in fact the objective is to outsource the entire accounting department of a company from stem to stern, then what are all those things they do? Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to do that for every company, but it means we could aspire to it. It means that we could be the CFO all the way down to the transactional work and everything in between. And so if you look at it that way, and I love the model the AICPA had of a pyramid several years ago, where they chunked it into CFO controllership and then accounting transactional work. That now, when you think about what a CFO does, they do forecasting, they do budgeting, they do dashboarding, they do benchmarking, they do all the things that are necessary for them to run the organization. And the larger or more complex the company, of course, the more kinds of things are done. If they're doing acquisitions, then they'll get into the valuation of their acquisitions, and that requires large data sets and lots of analysis. So it's a lot of data analytics at the top of the head, right? And the data analytics can come up from the data underneath that come up. If I were running a CAS department, I would go find myself a data analyst, like immediately. I go hire a student data analyst.
I totally agree. And I just have a quick story because I think it's really, really, really telling. Because that's what I've been telling firms. I've been telling firms, like, automate as you're shifting to 1.0. Use the technology like ADP, Bill.com, BotKeeper to automate all those services and to offer them in a way that's standardized and can be profitable. But now you're freed up. Instead of like growing and hiring more of those lower level people, you're freed up to hire those middle level, senior level directors, but bring in those data analysts. And my quick story for you is my daughter is really into Harry Potter. And so we live in Florida. Hurricane is brewing around us right now. But she loves Universal because she loves Harry Potter. So we go to Universal as much as we can. And we always ride, the last ride is Hagrid's motorcycle ride. We like to ride that at night. Typically it's like a 2-hour line. And so we're waiting in this long line and there's this really cute couple in front of us. And they were adorable. They were probably in their like 24, 25. They were young. And so I start chatting them up. and I asked them, where they're from. Well, they just graduated from university and they moved to Florida because they got a job at SeaWorld as data analyst. And I was like, woo, tell me more. Tell me more. What a cool first job as a data analyst is to work at SeaWorld, right? And so the guy, he analyzed all of the food vendors. So like the popcorn stand or the drink stand, he analyzed all of the food. So it was his job to make sure that they had enough product to sell, but he could also tell you which popcorn stand and which park, because SeaWorld has 12 parks, brings in the most revenue. And he would then say, let's have more popcorn stands because we know that we'll get more revenue if we have more popcorn stands. How cool is that? But her job was even cooler. Her job was to analyze when the rides might break. So she was watching all the data of the rides and she could predict that a ride was going to break before that it broke. And so I was like, wow, just imagine the power of firms being able to analyze a business and call a business and say, you're ready to break. I'm looking at everything and you're breaking, right? I mean, because the data tells us those things. Or that, maybe a firm has a restaurant, can analyze the restaurant and be like, you know what, this server is your most profitable server because they're doing this. Or, this person is selling more specials and the revenue is way more if you can get your service doing more specials. I mean, there's so much in this business data analyst. So sorry that I got so excited, but can you share more about, your vision on why bringing in these business analysts, data analysts is so crucial to the success of firms?
Yes, so it gets us into consulting services. And when you think about consulting services, to have them data driven, and all the consulting services that I do, even though it's growth related, right? It's all data driven. And I'll give you a story also. One of the things I do with firms is help them implement a firm-wide pipeline of new opportunities. And it's one of the most popular things I do because we can get it up and running very, very quickly within a couple of weeks. And most firms don't have any inventory of the open and active opportunities so that they can increase their quality of pursuit and drive high win rates. It's like every man and woman for himself, go out and do your best and that kind of thing. We implemented the pipeline in one of my firms about a year ago. 6 months in, they hired a data analytics student out of college. She took that pipeline and has made it sing. She has a cover page, an email that says, over the last year, or 6 months or whatever it is, these are how many we won and lost, and we've had more, our average transaction size is up about 20%. And our the amount of unqualified leads has moved down, and and on and on and on, and we have more business in the restaurant space than we've ever had, but not for profit is lagging behind. I mean, it's changed.
Yeah, I bet.
The entirety of how the firm looks at this thing, because they can pull stuff out and tell the story that you can't pull out. We don't have the time nor the inclination or background to do it, to tell the story. And any one of our clients, you can sit down, any one of your clients, and go into the restaurant space and say to the owner, what's your top issue? And they're going to say food waste. I'm picking something out of the pile. And where we implemented CAS in one of my firms in the restaurant space, we saved, within the first couple of months, we found that the food waste in one of our restaurants was $5,000 a month.
Wow.
And they're, what? And this was because we were using technology and data analytics in a business use case situation. And all you have to do is sit down and say in an industry related way, because they all have similar, it's fraud and food waste restaurant business, and it's something else and not for profit. And once you get it industry specific like that at the CAS level, you can start thinking about, okay, what kind of data and how would we solve that problem? Get yourself some early adopters, practice on them, and you're off to the races.
I agree. Well, and so you and I have talked about, that's in the CAS space, and that's hiring in different talent and selling new services and looking at your verticals and where you can be really profitable. But you also shared some other areas that you're seeing firms get into that are quite profitable, right, into this shift. And so digital currency, cryptocurrency, is something that I know you're seeing and you've got some ideas around, as well as ESG. And so those are, let's kind of like looking where you're at now, looking what you can do now to start making the shift, but what's to come? What are some other things that you're seeing firms start building out and offering to clients?
Great. Let's talk about those two, because those are the two top of my hit parade. Both of those are absolutely guaranteed that they are upon us and going to continue to be larger. I mean, a lot of things can come and go, but these two are a sure bet that they're going to be around. So the question becomes one of not are they going to be here or not, but just how quickly are they going to unfold? So you don't want to be too much on the head of, the nose of the ship, or you'll fall in the water, but you don't want to be back behind everybody else, right? And so it's important to know, how do I calibrate my investments along with the market? So in crypto, and by the way, I've been involved in helping firms bring their digital asset practices to market since the beginning, 10 years, almost 10 years now.
Has it been 10 years?
And it's been about 8, I think, 8-ish when they first cropped up. And so I started with my first firm 8 years ago with their digital asset practice. Today, now the digital assets are creeping onto balance sheets. So we in the CAS practice are going to have to figure out how are we going to account for this. And for those of you who haven't worked in crypto, AKA digital assets, it's a subledger. Okay, it's a subledger that doesn't have fiat dollars and cents in it. It's a subledger that has crypto assets in it, but it's a subledger nonetheless. And the big challenge is, of course, that a lot of our ERP systems do not account for digital currency. So there are organizations out here, companies out here that will do the transforming of and the valuing of so that you can roll it up into your books. So you're going to see it on balance sheets more and more, both for investment purposes and other purposes. You're going to see your clients allowing for their customers to pay in crypto, or they're going to pay their vendors in crypto. So you've got to get at least a basic knowledge of crypto, and Coinbase.com is probably the best go-to to say, to learn about it. What is crypto, and what are NFTs, and what is this, and what is that, and what's a stable coin, and all these things that you've got to have at least some basic vocabulary knowledge. The other place that it's cropping up, of course, is in our taxes and our tax work. And the CPA.com has a platform that can help accountants with, the tax implications of crypto. So that's happening too. So if your clients are going to be more and more involved in it, and therefore you're going to need to be more and more. To be in leading your client versus, the horses out of the barn and you're holding on to the reins, you don't want to do that. You want to come across as having at least a working knowledge in crypto. ESG is so big, I can't even describe what our future is going to look like, because I was talking to Deneen the other day, and I was talking.
Can you pause real quick before we move on to ESG, because we do have a question about cryptocurrency. So someone wants you to explain the importance of understanding the difference between Ethereum, the network, ETH, the native token, and tokenized assets, just such as USDC.
Okay. Tokenized assets, I'll start with them. And tokenized assets are, I'm trying to think if I should start with Ethereum or start with tokenized assets. Well, let me start with Ethereum. Okay. Okay. Ethereum is a platform that has these digital assets called ETH or ETH.
Okay.
the platform is Ethereum, and the asset or the coin or whatever is ETH. So think
Okay.
as a coin, but it's a digital coin. Now, tokenized assets are assets where they're different from ETH, because ETH is like a dollar bill, except, or a coin, right? But tokenized assets are individually unique, called non-fungible. Fungible means it's like a dollar bill and you can trade it around, and dollars are dollars and so forth. But non-fungible it is representative of a very specific thing. And that's what a tokenized asset is. Think of taking the Empire State Building and we're going to bust it up into 1,000 pieces, and each piece is going to be a very unique piece. So you own piece A of the Empire State Building. Or better yet, let's take the Mona Lisa, and we're going to have one token for it. And the tokenized asset for Mona Lisa is like exactly and only the Mona Lisa token. And so that's non-fungible, okay? Whereas the other is fungible, it's usable out in the market, but non-fungible it is unique and it's one of a kind.
So to me, this is like a foreign language. Like it's learning a whole other, like Ethereum. When did that word come out? ETH, right? Tokenized assets. Like these are all new words. So it is a lot to learn, but I think it's super exciting because when you and I were talking, you were talking about sort of like thinking about money in kind of 3 different ways. Can you share like that jar? Because I love the way you think about that and talk about that. I think it's powerful.
Well, so what I was describing to Deneen was why do I say that ESG is so enormous, okay? It's because when you think about the last 100 years, think about we have 3 bean jars. We have kidney beans, we have lima beans, and we have navy beans. The kidney bean jar is kind of a modest sized jar. It's about this big, full of kidney beans. And these are fiat beans. These are dollars and cents, right? That's called fiat. And we're counting and attesting for those for 100 years. Ever since the SEC said after the stock market crash, we're going to have auditors in here doing this. That's what we've been counting. Then about 10 years ago, we got into lima beans. And this jar is a bit bigger than that. And the lima beans are digital assets, cryptocurrency beans, okay? So this is Bitcoin, this is Ethereum, this is, all the various kinds of digital cryptocurrency beans that there are. And, countries around the world are adopting blah, blah, blah. And that's even bigger, right? Bigger than even the fiat beans. Now we come into navy beans. Great big. These are ESG beans. This is how big ESG is, because we're not counting dollars. We're counting carbon footprints and diversity in companies, and how many fish are in the North Sea, and how many plastic water bottles are in our ocean. I mean, it's so big that that's the reason I say we can't even get our heads wrapped around how significant it's going to be for us. We're just now at the dawn of the ESG age, and it's going to be super, super exciting.
I will say at conferences, I'm hearing a lot about it. So firms are starting to talk about it, but what are you seeing them starting to offer? Because I think, I was at a conference, I heard somebody speak, and they said in the 70s, 70% of the firm's revenue came from audit. That was in the 70s. But now, I would say about 10 years ago, I would talk to firms and like 40% came from tax, 40% came from audit, and 10, 20% came from consulting, and maybe, 8% came from CAS, but not even CAS, was like bookkeeping after the fact. And I would say right now we're seeing 20 to 30% of the firms coming from CAS, right? Audit's on the decline, tax has had about 5% growth, and CAS has had 25 to 30% growth. So firms have shifted through the years, right? But where do you see, as they're building out, they're shifting and they're building out these new, where are firms starting to offer services around ESG? What are they selling to clients? What are they advising clients? And how are they charging for that?
Okay, So at the very top end of the market, that's the big four, they are in fact with public companies offering audit services that are in the ESG space. So they're opining on things that are non-financial statement, but they don't have requirements yet. The SEC has just now in a period where they put a stake in the ground and said, this is what we think needs to be done, and they're going forth. So we should have something for public companies, within the next year. Now, for the rest of the mid-market, which is where most of the people on this call are, there are two main areas that are developing, and it's not the audit area just yet for smaller publics or privates, not yet. But the first thing out of the chute is risk services. So is kind of like in the risk management department, the SOC and the SOCs, the internal controls, the validity of the data, and those projects right now, I'm actually working with firms and bringing their first projects to market. So we just finished up in one of my firms and this is a rather modest sized firm, 2 projects for a real estate company. One was energy usage and the other one was diversity. And it was in looking at the data and looking at the processes and coming back with recommendations as to how to report. The other area that is popping up is actually going in and counting the beans themselves and actually putting in the processes to counting the beans. And so that's really doing it for them, setting up all the processes to collect the data and make sure it's accurate and all that. There's another piece, though, that I'm working with firms on right now, and that is the strategic planning facilitation at the board level around what is ESG, why do I care, how does it need to fit into my strategic plan? Companies have a strategic plan somewhere. It's either on the shelf or it's in their head, but it's somewhere. And whatever it is, it never accounted for ESG. So we've got to step back and say, okay, we will come in, we will facilitate a strategic planning session with the owners of the company or the board, and we will give a little cameo as to what it is, where it is, why you should care about it, and then start a strategic planning facilitation around where might it impact you and what do we do about it. So that's a brand new service we're developing right now in some firms.
That's exciting. And I think we can take a step back, though, and kind of bring it all back to now. And, how can leaders of firms, and I've seen and talked to several different types of leaders at the firms, really, contribute to innovating? Like, how can they help innovate now? Because I talk to those older CPAs, leaders that kind of are like, I don't want to change. I want to do what I've always done. I don't want to change. I talk to other firms about, trying BotKeeper, and they're like, well, then what will our bookkeepers do? Or how are they going to learn? And so we've got that, old school thinking, I think, and oftentimes in the leaders. And so how can they contribute to bringing in and looking at themselves and being strategic and innovating?
Deneen, this is the hard job of chipping away at mindsets. And the way mindsets get changed is not to throw them in the deep water and say good luck and good swimming, but to bring them along with an understanding and appreciation of what's going on. And an example is just what we talked about, ESG. If they're learning about ESG from the news and not from you, we've got a problem. Because we're supposed to be leading them, and here we are not leading them because we haven't taken the time to learn it ourselves. And research is something in a CPA's life that never goes away. Researching in the tax code, but now you're going to be researching in the crypto, halls of crypto and into the halls of ESG, so that we can lead our clients into the new world. And if we ourselves are saying, well, we're not going to change,
Yeah.
well, we have really given away the opportunity to
That's
lead,
right.
because that's what we're
That's where my
supposed to be doing.
That's where my head goes. My head goes, someone else is going to enter this space and start offering these services, and firms are primed to do it. So, you know, and clients want this kind of help from their, like, who else do they go to talk about their business? All right, I'm watching the time. Let's launch the last polling question, because then I want to talk to you. Okay, has your firm started offering new services? So we're really curious. Have your firm started looking into offering or started to offer digital currency consulting? Or has your firm started offering environmental, social, and governance consulting services?
And once they get done with this polling question, I have an additional point to make about this.
Okay, great. Because then I have another question for you. I'm going to go in another direction.
Okay.
So thank you for some of you answering we haven't started yet or putting none into the question box. If that is the case, please do so. Respond with none or NA in that area. Currently, it's saying 60% are offering ESG versus 40% digital currency. I'm going to close
Great.
the poll at 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Thanks, Stella. Gail, go ahead.
When I was at IBM, we were always talking about the things that were going to come way before they got there.
Yeah.
Because consulting is, selling is free consulting. They're just not paying you yet. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you were talking about ESG to them, you may not be getting any dollars and cents in the cash register today, but you're teeing up your future. So you don't just turn it on like a water spigot in 2 years and say, oh, by the way, ESG is now here. It is because you've been dripping the water faucet for 2 years you've been, or whatever it is, talking about it. And IBM knew this, which is why in sales, we were required to know all the new stuff that's coming out, and our job was to talk about it, even if we couldn't sell anything yet. We used to call it selling Apple, not an installing Apple. But we knew that the installing meaning we were going to have some hardware to install at some point, was on its way in the future.
Ah, I like it. I like it. Well, so I'm watching, we've got 8 minutes left, and I did want to shift a little bit to the other trend that I'm seeing, we're all seeing happening in the profession, where private equity now is coming in and very interested in firms, right? And so we saw it with, I think Eisner Amper was first, Terry Beckert was next, Citrus Cooperman are the top three. And now that these firms, and they shift, right? They have to break off, and a test is on one side and then tax and accounting is on the other side. But now that shift, has happened, they're gobbling up firms like crazy, right? They're acquiring firms like crazy. And so, I've been talking to a lot of the private equity now backed firms, and I understand sort of what is happening, but I'd love for you to share what you're talking to them about and you're seeing that's happening.
So it's kind of interesting, and sometimes I'm a lone voice in the wilderness, but it never bothered me. There's this theme that says you've got to go to get a private equity to finance your firm, or you're not going to be able to compete against the big boys. And I don't agree with that, because technology is the great leveler.
That's right.
Technology is going to let the mid-market have things that they couldn't have a few years ago.
Great equalizer.
Yeah. I mean, bots 4 years ago were almost out of reach to mid-market firms, but fractional bots, I knew they were right around the corner. And I asked one vendor, when are you going to offer a fractional bot? And he said, calm down, Gail, let us get the bot to the market. I said, but we need it down market, in the mid-market. So I don't agree necessarily with some of the other pundits that you got, because if you don't get a private equity infusion, or you merge up, you don't merge up, you're not going to have the money to participate in tech.
But I know they're approaching a lot of firms, and then the firm leadership is meeting on it, and some are like, no, we don't want to change, but then some are saying, you know what, never ever have we had the opportunity to have an influx of money, which means now we have money to innovate. Never have we had chance to spend and to innovate without taking this money. And so, I know that, again, having those leaders say, we've got to innovate, even if you have the private equity or the money or not, right? We've got to shift, we've got to evolve, because we are competing with these large companies that are gobbling up all these firms. And from what I've been hearing, what they want when they acquire these smaller firms is they want the customer. They want the customer because they want to sell the customer more services. They want to sell them more technology. They want to sell them more consulting. They want to sell them more ESG. And so, what are you, again, like, are you hearing that now these firms are innovate? Like, talk to me more about what you're seeing in this kind of space.
I think that the 3 or 4 firms that have gotten the equity infusion tend to be firms that are very forward thinking and, really on the cutting edge. But for the rank and file firms that are not the Eisner Amtners of the world, you have to understand that, and I'll just share my understanding. I came from that world. I came from the venture capital, private equity backed world in tech. It is a very progressive world. It is a world that doesn't take any prisoners. It is a world that doesn't take any excuses. What do you mean you didn't grow 30%? Wait a minute.
Right.
So when they walk into our CPA firms and our mid-market firms are not the most progressive organizations on the planet. In fact, with growth itself, I came from out of 1 through 10, a 10's the highest. I came from a 10. And I came into CPA land, back into CPA land, and the level of sophistication of growth and innovation is about a 3.5.
Wow.
So we're going to expect a lot. And when they walk in and see all 10 orphan 1040s being done, by candlelight, I'm overstating.
Yeah.
At least we don't have candles and abacuses, but we certainly are not at the bot keeper, zooming down the road level. They're not going to be happy about that,
Yeah.
I mean, it is so compelling for you to have your crap together.
Yeah.
If you want the money. And the other thing is they're going to ask a lot and they're going to carry a big stick. So I say to you that it isn't for everybody. And I'm not saying it's not a good thing. I'm just saying that it's not one of these that everybody and his brother is going to private equity infusion.
Well, and I like what you said. I mean, personally, like, I love working with small firms because they can innovate and shift the fastest, right? It's harder sometimes for the large and mid-sized firms to innovate quickly. And so sometimes the smaller firms, they can innovate and shift really quickly. So I'm watching the time. We've got 3 minutes left and we do have a question. Somebody would like for you to talk about integrated reporting. Who is going to do it?
Okay, so integrated reporting, I think what they mean is the integration of ESG with financial statement.
Okay.
I think, because there's an integrated reporting is used in another context as well. And if that be the case, this whole concept of the ESG piece of reporting morphing and coming into the financial statements, the SEC, it's going to start with the SEC's rulings, and it'll start morphing into the 10Ks and the 10Qs. That's where it will start. But down the line, it's hard to say how it will unfold. It's a movement to say that financial statement reporting is only a piece of the bigger pie, and we can't have financial statement reporting over here and ESG reporting over here, and never the two shall meet. So beyond that, it's really hard to know right now. There's a lot of standards going on around the world. There's a a vegetable soup of, organizations and so forth that are trying really, really hard to get this all together, so that we will have something that is very meaningful for investors.
Great. All right, with 1 minute left, Gail, what are your last words of wisdom?
My last word is, if you think about, and because I know we have a lot of CAS leaders on the line here, that your role, whether you know it or not, or anybody's told you, is that your role should be responsible for the strategic direction and financial health of the CAS practice. That's what your role should be. And if it's anything less than that, I wonder about it, because you're the president of this business unit.
Yes.
And as the president of a business unit, you're like the president of a subsidiary in corporate America.
Business.
So
yes.
If you shirk that responsibility of strategic direction because you don't have any time for future think, that's half your job. And so my word of wisdom is to really sit back and think about how you're going to get your plate cleaned off, move things around, staffing, talk to the managing partner and say, I need help, this is undoable, whatever it is, so that
I need budget, I need head count, I need to innovate, I need new technology, I need to run this like it's my business. Great last words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Gail. We covered a lot of really great topics. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you too. It's been great working with you again. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. There will be a survey that comes out after this webinar finishes, as well as an email that has the links to Gail's website with more resources. So thank you, Gail and Deneen.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.